What's up, DeFi Connect? All right, for anyone from 2017, you know what that's about. All my boys out here in the crowd. Today we're going to talk about institutional staking in Ethereum. For those who've been around a while, you know, the institutions have been coming for so long, at least that's what they said, and finally they're here. And I even hear that Tom Lee is coming after your ETH, so don't get scared and sell the bottom, okay? And in order to learn more about the institutions and how they're thinking, we recently conducted the 2025, I guess I could look down here, the 2025 Ethereum Institutional Staking Survey in collaboration with Lido and Kaiko. And we interviewed, 75 plus of the largest institutions in the space, whether it's exchanges, professional node operators, asset managers, custodians, ETF issuers. And we really wanted to see what they were thinking and where the landscape was going. What's so special about this is many of us will know some of these names and will have some of this context, but no one has kind of combined that together into a single source of truth or data set that we can learn more about. And today I'm just going to go over a few of those data points. For anyone who wants the whole data set, feel free, and we're happy to pass it over. It was a lot of work to go through it, and so thank you to the team that contributed to that. So the first big point was over half of the respondents have $1 billion plus in AUM. We can see here that 42% of them are between 1 and 10 billion. And so in hindsight, I think we would have been a little more granular with the questions because that's quite a big range. But 42% between 1 and 10, 11% between 10 and 50, and about 3% above 50 billion. Given this is the first year we're doing this, we'll continue to iterate to be able to provide better and better data, as well as probably increase the scale of the survey. But it's good to know that, these are like good size organizations. And one of the big takeaways, which can be like obvious or not obvious, depending who you talk to, is that 70% of them prioritize security and or regulatory alignment. For anyone who's been in the industry, I feel like we go between waves of security versus rewards, depending on the sentiment and the various kind of risks that people are experiencing. And the remaining 30%, we just batched it as other, and most of them, it was basically rewards or performance. As we kind of can imagine, there's obviously a trade-off there, but institutions being conservative as expected. One data point that I really personally liked is that institutions understand client diversity. And so as we can see here, whether they stake their own ETH or they stake on behalf of customers, pretty much everyone is, self-proclaimed expert or very familiar with client diversity. Client diversity is one of those things where if you talk to someone and they're not aware, they're very, very early in their Ethereum education cycle. And if they are understanding of client diversity, it shows that they've at least put some thought into understanding Ethereum. And the institutions clearly feel that way. Another big point is that institutions are rapidly adopting distributed validators. So we asked them if they're considering using distributed validators or if they have any experience. And about 52% said that they're already using or testing them. The other 32% said they're actively exploring the idea. And 14% was other sort of batch of different responses. In hindsight, I think we would have probably wanted to get more granular with we're already using or testing them, because that can be a very, to start testing and or use them, that cycle can be quite long. You could be very, very experimenting on testnet, or you could be deploying 100% of your infrastructure on mainnet. And so we'll want to get more granular in the future. But understanding what technology these institutions are running and or if they're even thinking about it is obviously very important. And we also asked them what are some of their perceived barriers to restructuring or upgrading their infrastructure. We're 5 years into the Beacon chain, and a lot of staking infrastructure has probably not been upgraded, and they're running, similar stacks to, initially. And we see that, they see the barriers, and there are various barriers. One thing that I really thought was interesting is that 30% of them found that they feel like they lack internal expertise. So if you are kind of a DevOps, staking wizard, it's good to know that there's a lot of demand for your skills, and that's very, very promising. For those, for other institutions, integration complexity or high perceived risk in switching setups was also quite high up. So, it appears they may be happy with their existing infrastructure. They may want to switch it over, but they need to get over the complexity and or feel like that complexity does not have risks. Okay. And so based on those results, as well as some other data points, I'm just going over a few here. Pantera, one of the largest capital allocators kind of in the whole industry, has released a recent endgame thesis. And so I would recommend everyone to look this up and read what Pantera has said. And this was released just a few weeks ago. In 2022, Pantera invested in Obol. And now, a few years later, they have reestablished their view and an updated view as the technology has matured. And they see that sort of the end game of staking is to be run on distributed validators. And so that's very exciting. And for those who are not familiar, which most of us here are, there's limitations to legacy validators, right? A single node will hold the full private key. You're locked into one operator. If you are using multiple operators, you have to sort of pick between your operators, send maybe 10 ETH to one, 20 ETH to another custodian, 30% of your ETH at home, and you sort of have a lot of friction to change these operators, and almost always they're going to have to exit unless they're sort of pooling stake. Obviously, you're subject to correlated failures. These operators are often running in similar geographies, similar cloud service providers, even in many cases, similar clients. And of course, that brings minimal client diversity. And to explain that further is no matter what, with legacy validator technology, you have to choose between a single execution and a single consensus client on your validator. You are not able to run multiple at the same time. And Sheen's shaking his head. And these are why distributed validators are the upgrade to legacy validators. One of the quotes that was pulled out of Pantera's thesis is, distributed validators are becoming a new standard for the future of staking. And so while we have some of these value props that most of us know, so I'll just kind of skip through it. We obviously have DKG. We have independent cluster architecture. This one is often, I think people don't understand. With Obol distributed validators, every single cluster is completely isolated and disconnected from others. So when Coinbase if they're running distributed validators, they are not connected, or there is no network or protocol or Oracle, a shared Oracle with Blockdaemon or with operators in Lido. They are fully isolated clusters. And obviously, this enables multi-operators. This is kind of the gold standard. Most people are not still aware of this in terms of the education cycle, but a single validator is ran by multiple operators or multiple individuals. And so if an operator is compromised, you are not experiencing issues across the validator unless it crosses sort of the Byzantine threshold. And finally, what's coming soon is operator rotation, where you will actually be able to have mutable clusters, and you'll be able to securely add or remove operators, which brings this multi-operator kind of standard to the next level. And so the way I really think that is what's helped me understand this the most is I wrote a piece called The Adoption Cycle of Distributed Validators. And anyone who's been kind of investing or around tech for a while has heard about the adoption cycle of any kind of technology. And it goes from sort of innovators to early adopters, early majority, and so on. And then a technology becomes sufficiently mature and kind of pauses innovation or continues, and potentially could even start a new curve depending on the changes. And Obol has already passed the innovator stage, or is late in the innovator stage depending on your views. This was originally spurred by liquid staking protocols, the first being Lido. Lido invested in Obol and was the first to champion it. and they utilized it primarily to decentralize their operator sets. So this technology allowed them to bring in more operators. I don't know the exact numbers, Dima would know, but from 36 to kind of 200 plus. And decentralizing operator sets was a big use case. And this was included in Operation Solo Staker with EtherFi and some of these other protocols. And now we're moving into the early adopter phase. This is what I consider to be the institutions. I think we're probably roughly here, although this spiral could be kind of anywhere. And these institutions are adopting this technology for a different reason, primarily around distributed key generation, the client diversity aspects, the isolated cluster architecture, like no shared network, no shared oracle, etc. And we will see as this adoption curve, this adoption cycle continues. And so anyone who wants to be kind of nerd out and talk about this kind of philosophical things, I would love to do that. It's quite fun. And that's kind of it. Looking ahead, we have some big things that are coming. We recently shipped a chain split halt feature, which will sort of protect your ETH if there is sort of a black swan like we saw on Holsky. We are going to be shipping operator rotation, so a trust minimized way to be able to add or remove validators inside those multi-operator clusters. This has been asked about for a very long time. And we also are going to be moving to a multi-client architecture. Ethereum is so amazing because of the multi-client architecture. We have multiple clients at the execution layer as well as the consensus layer. And just a few days ago, Nethermind announced Pluto. Pluto is the second client built on the distributed validator spec. And so we will have client diversity at the DV middleware layer, which is very exciting. You guys can go ahead online and check that out. We're also investing in speed, of course, doing research on new consensus mechanisms, another way to ensure the technology is keeping up with the demands of higher performance. And of course, we are year over year approaching kind of the end game, right? We're going to move to Ethereum, lean Ethereum with sort of threshold hash-based signatures, and we will see more and more ETH move onto distributed validators as it is just frankly superior to legacy validator infrastructure. And thanks, everyone.